Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com. In this tutorial we're going to take a look at multiple inheritance in C++. So I wasn't going to include a tutorial on this in my C++ courses because multiple inheritance is a bit horrible and some programmers like me prefer just to avoid it completely, but nevertheless it's the sort of thing that you get asked about on job interviews, so I probably should include a video on it. I've even been asked about this on one or two job interviews myself. So here I've created a class musical instrument and I've given it a method play and a method reset, which is supposed to reset the instrument to some kind of default settings. I've also created a class machine, and this has a method called start to start the machine, and it also has a reset method that resets the machine to default settings. Now let's create a class synthesizer. Now a synthesizer is both a machine and a musical instrument, so we can actually make it inherit from both classes. So we'll say public machine and comma public musical instrument. Let's give it a virtual destructor because I don't want to get any warnings here, and I'm going to make all of these methods virtual as well to say that they could be overridden. So most often when you define methods, probably most often you will make them virtual. They only don't have to be virtual if you're sure you're not going to override them. You're not going to want to override them. And this destructor of synthesizer has to be called synthesizer. So now let's actually create a pointer to a synthesizer. So synthesizer pointer psynth equals new synthesizer. I'm just using kind of C++ 98 style here, and we'll say delete psynth. So now we can call the methods of synthesizer. So it's going to have psynth from musical instrument. It's going to have a play method, so we can call play, and it's going to have a start method from machine, so we can call psynth arrow start. Let's run that, see if it works. So we've created this class that actually I did something wrong here. Let's just check. So calling a private destructor. Yeah, I've got to make sure I make this destructor in synthesizer public, of course. The destructor is usually going to have to be public. So if we run this now, we see that indeed we've created an object of a class which inherits methods from both machine and musical instrument. Now the problem comes if we want to call a method that exists in both. So both musical instrument and machine have a reset method. Let's try to call that. So we'll say psynth arrow reset. Unfortunately, the keys are in different places on all my keyboards, which is why I keep typing the wrong ones. So this gives us an error. What we need to do is disambiguate. We want to say whether we want the reset method from the machine parent or from the musical instrument parent. So for example, here we could type musical instrument reset. So now let's try building that and running it. So now it builds and we run it and we get it says resetting instrument because I've said that I want the version from the musical instrument class. If we type machine there instead, we're going to get the implementation from the machine class. Now one reason multiple inheritance is bad is because this requires you to know how synthesizer is actually implemented, and you want to hide away, encapsulate details of implementation as much as possible. You don't want the user of this class to have to know what the superclasses of synthesizer are, but here unfortunately you have to. Of course this wouldn't arise if machine didn't have a method that's identical to musical instrument, but unfortunately it does. There's also a thing called the diamond problem, where you try to do multiple inheritance from classes that share a base class somewhere down the line, and especially if that any methods that exist in that base class would then be inherited by the subclasses, and then you would have ambiguity again in this class that we've derived here. So in general, I would say it's better to avoid multiple inheritance unless you really feel strongly that you need it. And if you do use it, it's best if the classes you're deriving from don't have any methods with identical signatures, with identical prototypes like this. So if you get asked about this in an interview, they'll probably ask you what problems there are with multiple inheritance, and that's basically the answer, that you have this problem potentially with ambiguous methods and you need to disambiguate them, and that involves knowing implementation details of the derived class. So we'll leave it there for this tutorial. That's something that can occasionally be useful but is best avoided, but on the other hand best remembered for interview purposes. Okay, so until next time, happy coding.